All right, let's dive right into this. If you happen to miss the incredibly busy Monday afternoon session of the LCMS Convention back on July 20, 2026, well, don't worry, you're in the right place. We're going to walk through a clear chronological breakdown of exactly what happened, step by step, from the opening prayer right through to Vespers. Think of this explainer as your personal guide to unpacking the official transcripts and reports, so you can understand exactly how this afternoon unfolded. So here is our roadmap for the session. We'll cover devotion and reports, floor nominations, pastoral formation, rules and governance, mission and ministry, and finally, takeaways and the Tuesday look ahead.
Starting right at the top with Section 1, Devotion and Opening Reports.
President Harrison actually kicked things off with a devotion from Romans 5, centered on a really powerful theme: Christ changes everything. He provided this absolutely crucial gospel frame for the entire afternoon. It was a reminder to the delegates that, at the end of the day, human beings don't just need better administrative systems or stronger institutions. We need reconciliation to God. The church's true reliance is always on Christ's justification. And honestly, it was a really vital perspective to set the tone, especially for a session that was about to jump into some pretty heavy debates on executive authority, corporate structures, and ministry strategy.
Right after the devotion and approving the minutes, the Assembly got an informational update on the national offering. This offering supports grants for next-generation ministries. Think youth, campus, and family outreach. Now, let's break down these numbers real quick because the distinctions matter. They set a triennium goal of $1 million. Toward that, they received a massive foundational seed gift of $500,000. On top of that, the opening service offering brought in about $60,750. So when you add all that up with some other early gifts, the total received or committed so far is sitting just over $742,522. Pretty solid start.
All right, moving right along to Section 2, Floor Nominations Explained. Now, parliamentary procedure can get a little deep in the weeds, so let's demystify this. To understand the floor action here, we have to recognize 4 distinct steps. Delegates were opening closed nomination pools, then they were adding names to those pools, and then adding names to ballots. But here is the absolute most important takeaway. Literally no one nominated Monday afternoon was actually elected during the session. None of them. Adding someone to a ballot is just a preliminary step. It is not an election.
And to complicate things just a bit, all of those floor nominations were still subject to paperwork verification. That means signed consent and completed forms. So what happens when eligibility is kind of unclear right there on the floor? Well, it became a real issue. For example, Reverend Dr. Stephen Sebriel was nominated for the Commission on Worship in the Parish Pastor category. But delegates raised a flag, questioning if he met the requirement since he was believed to be retired or emeritus. So his final eligibility, along with checking the exact spelling of several other nominees, was explicitly left unresolved, waiting on the Secretary's official verification. Let's jump into Section 3, Pastoral Formation Votes. The very first major debate centered on an amendment for the Specific Ministry Pastor or SMP program. The problem they were trying to tackle was the program's strict 40-year age limit. The proposed action? Exempt the program from this restriction. Now, the strongest argument in favor was basically that an age line is just a rigid proxy, right? Sometimes younger men have genuine ministry contexts where packing up for residential study just isn't realistic. On the flip side, the strongest argument against it was that clear boundaries are absolutely crucial to protect the standard residential route, and the SMP program shouldn't slowly morph into a general replacement for that. Ultimately, the amendment to exempt the restriction narrowly failed, 54.3% against to 45.7% in favor. Immediately after that amendment failed, the convention moved to vote on the main motion itself, which was Resolution 6-06A. The action here was straightforward: formally affirm the present SMP framework. It was really designed to settle any lingering questions about the program's validity while making sure to recognize the equal dignity of pastors serving in the one divinely instituted office. Since the earlier amendment failed, this main resolution passed easily, with the 40-year age limit firmly intact, securing a very commanding 80.59% of the vote. Committee 6 kept the momentum going with Resolution 6-07A, addressing the ongoing need for continuing education. The main action was encouraging SMP pastors to move toward general pastor certification, the residential alternate route, or an MMDiv, while actively urging congregations and districts to help foot the bill. The argument was simple: further theological formation benefits the entire church. This one sailed through with 88.58%, officially shifting Synod's stance to active encouragement. Next up was Resolution 6-08, which tackled some confusing terminology around the SMP mentor role.
The action was just replacing the word supervision with oversight. Why? Well, supervision kept getting confused with official ecclesiastical supervision, which is strictly the job of district presidents. This one passed easily by voice vote, effectively cleaning up the terminology.
Moving to Section 4, Rules and Governance Changes. Before they even touched the bylaws, the Assembly adopted a special standing rule amendment to fix a procedural bottleneck. It proposed that a motion to call the question, which means to close debate, now applies exclusively to the immediately pending question. The argument for this was that delegates were accidentally losing their voice on main resolutions if debate was prematurely shut down while they were just discussing an amendment. Passing with 67.06%, this is a big deal because it protects the Assembly's right to debate a main resolution, even if they've closed debate on a pending amendment.
With that new rule locked in, Committee 9 brought Resolution 9-02A to clear up some fuzzy conflict of interest and fiduciary responsibility rules. The proposed action was just to clarify the bylaws. The main argument was that good stewardship demands transparent guidelines, and honestly, the Assembly agreed. It passed overwhelmingly with 95.01%. Then things got interesting with a debate over the chief operating officer position. An amendment attempted to remove the layperson requirement, which would allow a rostered church worker to serve as COO. The argument in favor was that it expands the talent pool, but the argument against it stressed preserving church-state distinctions. That amendment crashed and burned, failing massively with only 13.14% in favor.
Because that roster amendment failed, the Assembly went ahead and adopted the main resolution, 908, by voice vote. This officially addressed the ongoing debate over the COO's roster status by keeping it a strictly lay office. The prevailing argument was all about preserving clear pastoral vocation and corporate distinctions. Right after that, Resolution 909 also passed by voice vote. This one tackled the problem of administrative overlap by officially coordinating the chief mission officer's duties with other Synod officers. It's basically a move to ensure much smoother executive operations. Okay, now we arrive at Resolution 911. This was a highly significant, permanent governance change. The problem it intended to address was a bunch of unresolved questions regarding legal frameworks. The main action was centralizing authority by explicitly making certain entities agencies of the Synod. The big argument in favor was that this achieves structural clarity and much-needed accountability. However, the major questions raised against it involved some really heavy concerns about implementation and a lack of consultation, specifically regarding district church extension funds, or CEFs. Now, to be absolutely clear, based on the source documents, while the governance structure shifted, the Synod did not take ownership of district CEF assets. The resolution passed with 73.39%, but exactly how this new centralized framework gets implemented locally is definitely going to be a major item to watch going forward.
Let's shift gears to Section 5, Mission and Ministry Initiatives.
The afternoon featured a really vital block of information. The Assembly heard an international mission presentation, a greeting from WELS, which signaled some great ongoing confessional dialogue, and a national mission presentation that highlighted 32 church plants currently in process. We also heard from the LCMS Foundation. They reported facilitating $190 million in future planned gifts and distributing $70 million to over 1,000 organizations just last year alone. Now, it's really crucial to label these moments for what they were: informational reports and presentations. These were not binding convention votes, but they perfectly set the stage for the outward-facing work that came next. Coming right out of those presentations, Committee 1 brought 3 outward-facing resolutions that all passed easily by voice vote. To address the need for new congregations, Resolution 107A proposed tangible church planting goals, which were argued as absolutely essential for domestic mission. To solve a lack of dedicated campus support, Resolution 1112 directed the restoration of a full-time campus ministry staff position. The core argument was that universities are critical mission fields, even though this move does carry an estimated recurring annual cost of about $200,000. And finally, to combat anecdotal assumptions about youth leaving the church, Resolution 109A mandated new, hard research into generational retention. The logic there is simple: better data leads to better ministry resources. Finally, Section 6, Takeaways, and our Tuesday look ahead.
Here is your definitive ledger of the afternoon session. A really large slate of resolutions was officially adopted, touching everything from SMP certification to centralized governance and campus ministry. As we saw, the amendments to drop the SMP age limit and to allow a rostered COO officially failed. But crucially, several administrative items remained unresolved when the gavel fell, particularly the actual implementation of that CEF governance under 911 and the final eligibility of floor nominees like Stephen Briel. Which leads us directly to the delegate homework for Tuesday. Because Monday added several provisional names to the ballots, delegates needed to review the newly enlarged ballots and all those candidate biographies. They needed to check Tuesday's Today's Business publication for any corrections, and most importantly, they had to await the Secretary's official eligibility rulings on those floor nominees before the massive blocks of elections and ecclesiastical supervision work scheduled for Tuesday.
To close our explainer, we return to the very theme President Harrison opened with. Yes, convention actions, bylaws, and budgets deeply matter because we want to steward gifts wisely and send the gospel out effectively. But ultimately, none of these administrative actions create the church. Its true preservation doesn't rest on a keypad or a parliamentary ruling. It rests completely on Christ crucified and risen, given through his word and sacraments. He really is the one who changes everything. So as these newly passed resolutions move from the convention floor into local congregations, the question to leave you with is, how will these structural changes actually impact the day-to-day mission of the church right in your own community? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and we will see you next time.